Hey friends, it's Kari from the Alfred Homestead, and today I wanted to share with you guys how I can bone broth. So, this generally takes a 2-day process for me because I like to roast my birds and get the broth made on one day and then can the broth the following day. This has just been the easiest process for me, especially when we've harvested 5, 6, 10 roosters that we need to go ahead and process. Now, I've just got a couple of turkeys here, but nonetheless, it's going to be the same process. I went ahead and roasted the birds and we took all that meat off. And I did save this juice, this liquid, from the bottom of the pan, from the roasting pan. This is liquid gold, y'all. This has so much flavor that I don't even bother canning it. I save it and use it as broth and soup the following day. So once you have your birds roasted and all the meat off, I'm going to put that in my pressure cooker. If you guys don't have a pressure cooker, you can always do it in your slow cooker overnight, but the pressure cooker I find is so wonderful. I set it for 4 hours and it's perfect. So I don't want to fill these up too much. I actually am going to split the birds, so I have one bird in one Instapot and another bird in the other. And because I know that my pressure cooker can hold 7 wide mouth jars, the quart size, then I'm going to put that much water in there. And don't forget to take that little plastic piece off the birds before you make your broth. So if you don't have an Instapot or another pressure cooker, just put it in your slow cooker and that should do the trick for you. So I'm going to set my Instapot for 4 hours for both Instapots. So both birds will cook for 4 hours in there. So this is at the beginning of the day so that they've got the rest of the day to pretty much cook and cool down before I put them in my fridge overnight to cool. So just as a quick note here, I am putting, like I said, I'm splitting 7 quarts of water between the 2 Instapots because I know that's how much I'm going to have to can. So you can base how much water you use on that with how much you know that you're going to be able to can. If you have a larger canner, then you can do a little bit more. 7 quarts is perfect for 2 birds, I find, to get a nice concentrated broth that's not too watered down because we want that nice gelatinous broth, not anything too liquidy, right? So once the 4 hours is up, I will take the inner pots out of the Instant Pots and leave them to sit on the counter for 4 to 5 hours to cool off before I put them in the fridge overnight. Now you can do this all in the same day if you find that you've got the time. However, when you've got kids like I do and 1,000 other things on the to-do list, splitting this into 2 days is just an absolute lifesaver. It means that I can get everything done without having to stress and cram it all in one day. So this is the following day, and I just heated up the broth a tiny bit just to make it a little bit more liquid. And I've got my sterilized jars here, my clean lids, everything's really clean. And I've got a funnel here just to pour everything in for me. We want to try and be as clean as possible if we can. We don't want to make a huge sticky mess outside of our jars. So I'm going to go ahead and pour those in, trying to be careful. Again, I am starting this process from basically lukewarm liquid. You just want to make sure that whatever temperature your liquid is at in the jars, you generally want to have that same temperature in your canner. So I'm just starting out with lukewarm temperatures. So it's going to take a little bit longer for my canner to heat up and come to pressure, and that's totally fine. Make sure to wipe down your jars really well. There's a little bit of fat on this broth, and I'm okay with that. I just make sure to dip my little towel here in some vinegar just to help cut some of that grease where the seal is going to be, because you don't want to affect the seal in any way. That grease can kind of do that if you don't make sure to get all of it off. So make sure that's very clean and dry once you put your lids on. So I'm going to go ahead and put all the lids on here, and make sure when you put the screw tops on, the rings, that you're just going finger tight, okay? You don't want to do them too tight. Remember, we're trying to pressure can these, and we need to have that nice seal without it being affected by that ring being too tight. So this isn't a rushed process, as if I had had everything already started to like a simmer. It's nice and easy going. That's why I like starting them out at lukewarm temperature, because I don't have to worry about keeping all the temperatures just right to match each other. So when you put your cans in your pressure cooker, generally you want your pressure cooker to be about half full, maybe 2/3 full. I actually emptied some water out of this because it ends up being a little bit too full, and that's fine. I just took my jars out because, like I said, I started everything from lukewarm temperatures. So I just took them out and then poured some of the water out. You don't want to have too much water in there because it's going to affect the pressure. Okay, so on my stove, I start out at an 8. It goes up to, let me see, I think it's like a high is the highest one, and then 8 is the next lowest one after high. And that's going to go ahead and get it started. It's going to be a few minutes. I think it took about 30 minutes to get this venting. So this little vent here is going to allow the steam to escape while everything heats up in the canner. So that was probably at least 30 minutes here, and you're going to have that vent going, and you want to let it vent for 3 to 5 minutes. It's always better to let it vent just a little bit longer, just to make sure that you get enough pressure in there. So now that we have the vent, we let the vent go for 5 minutes. I put that weight on there and I turned down the temperature 1 notch. So we're going to slowly build up pressure. A lot of issues arise with canning because you start out at a high temperature and then you think, oh, I got to turn it down now, and then that fluctuation can cause issues with sealing your jars. So we don't want to fluctuate. We want to keep it nice and steady. So every 5 minutes or so, I turned it down 1 notch. And the closer I got to my pressure, my 10 pounds of pressure, the slower I went, so that I hit 10 pounds of pressure just right. And I didn't have to adjust by moving the temperature back up or moving it down too far. So you're gonna have to play and adjust with your own stove, but just take it slow. Slower is always better. You don't want any wild fluctuations in your pressure. And I am at a 10 psi for my altitude. Double check your altitude online and make sure that you need to be at a 10 psi. You might need to be at a little bit more. So eventually I know with my stove and my pressure canner that I am going to eventually make my way down to 2, which is 1 spot away from the lowest setting on my stove. So once I hit 10 is when I'm going to start the clock for 25 minutes. Broth needs to cook and pressure can for 25 minutes in quarts or 20 minutes in pints. Now after 25 minutes, this is what it looked like. I was just over 10 psi, and that's okay. Having a little bit more pressure is fine. If you go even just the slightest bit under 10 psi, then you're gonna have to start all over again. Start your timer all over once you hit 10. So it's always better to be a little bit on the safer side. And this is where you just wanna leave it. Once your 25 minutes is up, turn the stove off, let it sit. It'll probably take an hour to come down to pressure. You'll see that little gauge right there that pops up when you've built pressure will go down and be flush with the lid again once you can open up the canner. You don't want to mess with this while it's still under pressure. So an hour or 2 later, I saw that that top was down flush with the lid, and I can go ahead and take my jars out very carefully. Remember, this is still piping hot, and you have to just be careful. I've got little kids around, and it's always like a juggling act, but my husband is here helping out to make sure that none of the kids got in the way or wanted to mess with the jars or anything like that. So once you have all of your jars out, make sure that you let them sit for a full 24 hours overnight, and make sure you take those screw lids off. The rings need to come off, and you need to wipe down your jars. You don't want to store your jars if some of that broth happens to get siphoned out, or if there's like specks of food or anything like that on your jars. And always remember to not stack your jars. That is going to be the same reason why you take these screw lids off, because you don't want a false seal. All right, and there you have it. Wonderful, nutritious, homemade broth, canned and ready and convenient for you to use. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys next time.